Has streaming video really killed the cinema?
Who's winning the streaming media wars?
And what does Telstra's Fetch deal mean for Aussie viewers? Vertical Hold is proudly brought to you by Aussie Broadband, changing the game with their award-winning network and Australian-based support.
Hi there. Welcome back to Vertical Hold Behind the Tech News, the tech podcast where we catch up with Australia's leading tech journalists to dive into the big tech stories of the week. Snorkel's optional. I'm Alex Kidman, joined as always by my trusty sidekick, Adam Turner. Or maybe I'm his trusty sidekick. It can be hard to tell sometimes. Hey, Adam, in news that I'm sure will thrill you, it's been reported that Microsoft's going to bring casual games into your favourite Microsoft app, Microsoft Teams.
Oh.
What casual game would you like to play while dealing with Teams?
Well, thinking of some of the Teams conversations I have, it would have perhaps buzzword bingo needs to be in there. But I think really something to do with ancient Egypt, because as I keep saying, Teams is the 11th plague.
Not a bad choice, not a bad choice. We're joined this week by a man who definitely knows where the TV remote control is. Spoiler, it's in the sofa cushions. From TV Blackbox, it's the one and only Steve Molk. Steve, what would be your go-to game for dealing with dull virtual meetings?
Minesweeper.
Oh, good call.
I honestly think that is actually one of the ones that they're talking about integrating into Teams, because it's Microsoft.
Sure. Yeah.
So I can grant your wish, I think.
Could you imagine playing Minesweeper as a multiplayer turnabout and the other person buggers up your run?
Oh, yeah, that's going to ruin some friendships right there.
See, I just want to play Minesweeper in a Teams meeting where I can blow up the slides to make the meeting go faster.
Every successful clearance.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Every successful clearance reduces the time of the meeting by 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Now, Steve's joining us this week to talk all things streaming, but not just streaming online. Because, well, look, the explosive growth of online streaming services has utterly changed the way we consume visual media across the board. Movies are made directly for big streaming companies. Some of them even win Oscars. And amidst the chaos of the pandemic, there have been some huge changes to how and when we get to see movies. Once upon a time, which is to say less than a decade ago, you'd wait months, if not years, to see a film if you missed it at your local cinema. But now it's sometimes a matter of weeks, if that at all. Steve, what fresh magic is being woven this week in terms of cinema release schedules?
Well, yeah, this is the incredible thing for mine. Now, I will preface this by saying that Bob Chapek, who spoke at the Disney investor results thing at the end of 2021, did say that they were looking at setting a smaller, what they call theatrical window, the first run for movies, that normally is fairly long, usually 90 days, sometimes even bigger. So that's the amount of time that you can have before it goes to your, what used to be your video rental market. Now it's your streaming.
This is the only in cinemas thing they chuck on trailers.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
Yep.
So at time of recording, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is still in cinemas in Australia, is landing on Disney Plus in full. So if you've got a normal Disney Plus subscription, you'll be able to go home by the time you hear this and flip over. And if you haven't seen it, or even if you have, watch it again.
Will you have to pay for it? Is it one of those early release, give us $30 things?
The Premier Access series. No, It won't be. This is a release to the full Disney library.
Oh, wow. Because I assumed it was one of those early release things, which it's like, oh, how much is it going to cost me to the movies versus this maybe? So how long is it since Doctor Strange was actually first released at Australian cinemas? Like, what's the size of this window?
Sure. Well, what Chapek was suggesting was a 45-day theatrical window. However, I can promise you, as I said, it is still in cinemas in Australia. So by my best recollection, I think it premiered about 3.5 weeks ago, maybe 4, and that only puts it at 28 days in Australia. And like I said, it's still in some cinemas.
Now, we saw a bunch of this stuff bounce around in the early days of the pandemic. I think it was a dreadful Trolls movie that went out like day and date, and I think In the US, the Bill and Ted sequel did as well, but not
Yes.
here because cinemas were still open. Are we still dealing with the kind of vestigial part of that where the movie makers are going, well, we may as well just go digital anyway? Or is this something new?
Look, this is definitely a new and an intentional move by Disney because they want to add some real value to their Disney Plus platform and ensure that subscribers who pay their hard-earned $8.99 a month or whatever it is now, $160,000 a year, can access the full suite of programs and movies as soon as they can. And the only way, from Disney's perspective, that you bring that value is by delivering your big blockbuster films within reason as quickly as you can. Now, you're right. During the height of the pandemic, where we couldn't really go out in Australia to cinemas, they introduced this idea of premiere access, where you could pay your $30 and get early access to whatever, but it still turned up 60 days later, and everyone could see the film. It just that you got to see it first. The notion that they're doing this more and more, or are intending to deliver more and more content just directly to the full library, not in an exclusive paid scenario, is a real shot across the bow of your other cinema studios, and particularly even, of course, HBO Max as their big competitor in the US, who were doing some of that stuff where they were doing it same day and date, cinema and streamer. Disney have kind of held off. They do want to prefer that we go to the cinema for some things, but they are also going to roll the dice on that. And then compare this to Top Gun Maverick or your Jurassic World Dominion Squared or whatever we're up to with the Jurassic World franchise. We will not see them on a streamer for easily 2 to 3 months plus.
So I can't believe I'm saying this, but should we feel a bit sorry for Hoyts here? Like they've done it hard, as a lot of businesses have during the pandemic. But isn't this just another kick in the guts? Are they big enough to push back, or no one's big enough to push back against the mouse?
Look, I think that they can have a go. And Disney, no question, are testing the water in this. They're the first ones that are making a really clear play for how they want to do that delivery, because really just prior to the pandemic, they set up this new to them direct relationship with the consumer. And I think that they want to leverage that, and because in the same way, the Disney shares are now built on how well Disney Plus performs. And if all of a sudden, well, when the Marvel franchise drives up and they stop making the 17,000th Star Wars film, what are they going to have on the platform? So they've got to be really starting to deliver and build a feeling of goodwill from the consumer into that. And absolutely, yes, Hoyts and your what used to be Birch Carroll and Coyle, Greater Union, all of those places are in a real predicament, because they are now not just competing with each other as to which cinema I'm going to go to. They're now competing as to whether or not I'm going to sit at home and watch that film that I could have gone to see in their very super duper leather couches.
Steve, I get the feeling that Disney will stop making Star Wars films roughly around the heat death of the universe, maybe a couple of seconds beforehand.
I'm so thankful for that.
That being said, though, from a consumer standpoint, and I suppose I should put my cards on the table, I haven't been inside a cinema this decade. That's largely because of the pandemic, but I have not actually been back to a cinema since 2019. And I can see an argument to say, well, isn't this flexibility of choice a consumer win? I mean, I have paid premium access for stuff on Disney that I wanted to see. I did that for Black Widow, for example. I would quite happily do it, in fact, for more movies, I think, than I would do cinema, even though I will admit there is an absolute cinema magic to going there, the big screen, your attention is absolutely undivided.
Yes.
I still like the idea of having that choice. Is this a consumer win? Is it a consumer loss?
I think, look, my default reaction is that it's absolutely a consumer win. I think that longer term, there'll need to be some concessions made around the relationship either between the studio and cinema, or how the consumer fits into that relationship, or even maybe that relationship just entirely ends and you only get your Disney product one way and you only get your Paramount product via them, and so on and so forth. I'm of the opinion, and I think we touched on this in a previous conversation, that given the amount of money that people have spent to build up their home studios, I mean, not all of us can have incredibly weird looking sort of black and white print curtains hanging up behind us to build that atmosphere of, living in a hovel. But in doing so, it's allowing us to say, and you have to spend less money even today to do it. I've got this home theatre experience, and even if I want to pay the Premier Access $30, $35, or whatever it is, and it's got me and my partner and maybe two smaller people, before we buy food, $35 is still cheaper than me getting out and going to the cinema.
Easily.
Yeah,
I mean,
easy.
half price on less for most
But
cinemas.
that's it. So it's a win for Disney because they absolutely cut out the middleman. They are just getting $35 of air quotes pure profit out of the consumer or directly from the consumer. And for the consumer, it's a win because all of a sudden I can sit there in my tracky dacks and watch it and pause it and rewind it and go to the toilet and not miss anything. And what did he say? And who was that person again? And why did that happen? And not have to deal with the person behind me crinkling the popcorn that
I
I
was going
can't
to
see
say,
the
and
bed.
why is that dickhead at the end of the aisle talking through Doctor Strange? I wanted to hand the guy my business card so when we hire it again, he can come around to my house and talk again so I can get the same cinema experience.
Except, I suppose, the counterpoint to that, playing into the movie magic aspect of this, is that
Yes.
the person asking, hey, who is that, is in fact your partner or your kids or your best friend who won't shut up. There are more distractions in the home versus being
Yeah.
in a cinema where your phone is away and
Different
no one's actually
distractions.
getting at you.
Oh, sure.
But is that enough of an experience to be worth paying for?
Look, I think particularly as we well appreciate with the cost of living going through the roof, the capacity for us to leverage our home assets is only going to mean that it is a better proposition for us to be able to even dealing with, children climbing out of bed and needing attention or, telling your partner to shut up and the third divorce coming through because somebody rewound the movie, still wins over having to get a babysitter or take your small people out or deal with the tragedy of which session do we see, negotiating calendars, when you can go, you know what, it's probably not the best experience, but we might pause it tonight and go to bed or give up on this film and we actually haven't lost out too much, or we'll watch it again and again and again because we loved it so much for no extra cost.
Third divorce? Why are you marrying this person 3 times? It's not meant to be, Steve.
Yeah, that's
Somebody
just
should have
within the
learned a
one
lesson
film.
by now. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you think this will change the kind of movies that actually go to the cinemas? And if so, is it more likely to be the bigger blockbusters go to the cinemas because that's what people want to pay for, or are the big blockbusters the ones going to do this? So it'll be the smaller, different arty kind of ones that are the ones you go to the cinema. How do you see it changing?
Oh, yes, with an if, no with a but. I think that your Hoyts and your big chain cinemas that specialize in the Dolby, Googleplex audio and the rest of it, there will, and we see it right now, right? Top Gun Maverick, the best way to see that film is in a big cinema with big noises and a huge screen and, ideally some people that will ooh and ah at the same time as you. It is just a big screen film. It'll do fine on your home big screen TV, but there's nothing like watching it on a screen that is 4 stories high. It's just amazing. So there will always be a place for that. The challenge is how much it costs to run those franchises in between your big screen epics. I know that we've got Avatar 2, 3, 4, and 17 coming, and they will, I would expect, be big screen. Well, there are fans of the franchise, apparently.
I'm glad to see that
They
the
will
Blue Man
be,
Group's still getting some work.
mate, and as well they should. They're fine people. That they will be big screen epics. You want to go and see them there if you're into it. Your Jurassic World Dominion the same way. There will always be your Regals and your smaller cinema chains that specialize in your art house stuff that will, because people want to make the effort to go and be a part of that. I think what it does is allow those of us like me that are a little bit more relaxed, say, about whether or not we want to put the effort in. Oh, it's too much for me to go and see that over there because I have to whatever. Whereas now I can, it's on my thing, and I press play, and I get to enjoy it in the same way.
I was going to say, I think, Adam, my take on your question would be, we're already there. The big tentpole movies are the ones that absolutely play better in a cinema, drag you in, as Steve was saying, it's the big effects, it's the big noise, it's the explosions, it's all that stuff. And of course, that is also the stuff that plays really well internationally. It's why you get so many superhero and action films now, because that's something that translates a lot of cultural boundaries without transgressing them when you're dealing with, more nuanced matters of politics, religion, or sexuality, for example, where you might get a film that might do reasonably well in the States, but would never play in China, for example, which is a very big emerging market for cinema
See,
stuff.
here's a really interesting hard take on that as well, though. The division of Disney that is Lucasfilm have absolutely got a plan for cinema/film releases for the Star Wars universe for years to come. They have that mapped out. What they made really clear at their most recent announcement at Star Wars Celebration is that the immediate to midterm future of Star Wars, possibly even longer term, is far more limited series or multiple season television style Star Wars stories than cinema. There will still be film, but your Obi-Wan Kenobis, your Andor, your that kind of stuff, where it is telling a tale over a longer seasonal run, heaps more of that coming, heaps
Is that
more,
an
and it's
economic
playing really
decision,
well
or
for them.
why
It
are they
is in
doing that?
part, Adam, that it's economic. I think reality,
Hmm.
it's the fact that they have a locked-in fan base who are loving the storytelling, and it gives them a bigger freedom in the storytelling. 90 minutes versus, let's be fair, 6 episodes at 40 minutes for Obi-Wan Kenobi. What's that, about 5 or 6 hours?
I would think
Nearly?
a big I would think a big part of it also is that it lets them keep doing the weekly drop. Because if you want people to
Mm-hmm.
keep
Mm.
subscribing to Disney, then, well, I'm watching Obi-Wan and it's got 6, 8 episodes or whatever. So I guess I've got to keep subscribing to the end of that. Oh,
Yes.
now the Jabba the Hutt backstories come along. I guess I better keep subscribing. Where if movies are coming along, it's easier to dip in and out. But if every show comes out, goes for at least a month, and you have that little bit of overlap, then you've got no choice but to keep subscribing.
I think the win for Disney is that they've recognized they can't hang their hat on just one series, though. I
Yeah.
agree. It is the let's drop this. And in Australia, we have the benefit that all of the Hulu content, which they now own, is hidden away in the star folder of your Disney Plus subscription. So that's where Dope Sick landed. That's where Pam and Tommy landed. And to be frank, they were excellent content, not necessarily all of it for your kids, but a great value add if you've gone, I'll sign up for Pixar and Star Wars and Marvel and those kinds of things. And
Yeah.
by the way, there's this whole other library of stuff tucked over here that your teenagers and yourself and your partner might dig a whole lot more, and that adds greater value to exactly what you're talking about.
So, question without notice, Steve, because I haven't had Disney Plus for a little while.
Mm.
Have they crossed the streams? Do they have the Hulu exclusive Animaniacs series yet?
Oh, look, it's coming. Is the official answer to what's going to happen over here. It hasn't yet landed in Australia.
Sad face.
Very sad face.
Anyone who's
Extremely
watching the
sad
videos,
face.
you've seen Alex's face drop.
Ugh. I'm waiting for it too. I can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
So that brings us to talking about looking at Netflix, for example, because Netflix does not tend to make things for the your Hoyts experience the way that Disney does. So Netflix's movies used to be, I guess, what we used to call in the day made for television, except it's not made for television. How is their strategy changing? Do they release stuff into the cinemas, and also are they feeling the squeeze from the competition a bit more?
Yeah, Adam, the only reason that Netflix are dropping anything into cinemas is to try and get Oscar
Oh yeah.
categorization. So they are dropping some films into very short cinema runs in the States to meet the requirements for it to be able to be nominated for an Oscar.
So that they've got it
And
in the cans, you might say.
yeah, well played. And I think they will play that game until the Academy for Motion Picture Arts and Sciences go, you know what? Making it happen in a cinema versus landing on a streamer doesn't matter so much. They're still going to cast a critical eye on what their nominations are. So I think that there's still a benefit in the cinema, sort of situation. And I use this as an example, not because it's a great film and should be Oscar nominated. However, the new Chris Hemsworth film made for Netflix, Spiderhead, will not go up for an Oscar. They're not going to put it in cinemas to try and give it a run. However, it isn't, even because of that, can't be considered. Now, in the future, if they determined, you know what, let's give them the opportunity to just say, we put out an original film. It only went to Netflix. Should we include it to be able to be nominated? Not even to get to be a nominee, just able to be nominated. I don't think that that's far off at all in that context. But Netflix have a whole bunch of other things to worry about as to whether or not they're getting films nominated for Oscars.
Such as?
Well, the most recent one is, of course, their share price is in the toilet, comparatively speaking. And that means ultimately for Netflix to try and right the ship, they have done what they can with the content, and the content will continue to flow. And it's absolutely not hurting them that Stranger Things Season 4 has been an absolute breakout hit for them again. Another big record, another record number of streams, of hours watched, and the rest of it. But what it unfortunately means for Netflix in the short to medium term is job cuts. You'll note that the cuts aren't happening, however, in the area that does the commissioning. It's not happening where all of the lifting, shall we call it, goes into around those sorts of things. It sort of bits around the body of Netflix. Also, we have to acknowledge that Netflix is still in part reshaping itself as a company that started by sending out DVDs in the mail. Like, we are a fair way away from that, but it is still working out the outcomes, the outworkings of being that business.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've discussed how they've diversified into games, for example, before.
If you want to call it that.
Well, but they've got to play in that. They're still dipping their toes here and there. The stock price thing, of course, raises the prospect that, shall we say, a certain mouse-obsessed house could always just kind of swoop in and lay out a bit of cash for a Netflix.
It'd have to be a lot of cash.
A lot of cash. Like, that's the real challenge. It is possible. And at this stage where you've got media companies eating other media companies, Paramount, CBS, Viacom CBS being bought by Paramount and their rebranding and the rest of it just shows there is money to fall out of the sky on some places. I think that Disney will always remain a tier one media company, if for no other reason than they proved that when they flex the mouse's muscles, they can just eat up Marvel and devour Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
They got Marvel. I mean, they got Marvel for a bargain. They really did not spend very much money on Marvel at all.
And the catch is that the amount of money that they've paid Kevin Feige to turn it into the absolute, monster that it is, they could double his salary and it still wouldn't touch the sides on the amount of money they've made from that. But you follow my methodology that they've just been able to go pick. They made some smart investment in building Pixar and doing what they did around that and buying it early. So all of that stuff has played well to them. However, shareholders are still voracious in how they want to get returns from their company. And I'm not saying that Netflix is untouchable. Right now, however, it's still in a reasonably safe position.
Well, who's breathing down their neck?
Mate, look, you'd have to say the only people that really have the capital to want to jump up and down and do anything are Disney or Bezos.
I was going to say, or Amazon. He's not short on cash. Well, actually, he might be. He's going through a divorce. But apart from that,
it would be an interesting play. I can't see them wanting to do it. Netflix is valued from a market perspective far too high. Mind you, it would be 2 ivory back scratches for Bezos. He wouldn't care. But for Amazon itself, it would be a pricey proposition for them to buy in. And for what reason? They're pumping out content, good content, I might add, onto Prime Video that is ostensibly just an add-on to make sure that you buy stuff from them. Yeah. That's the only reason Prime Video exists.
And it works. It sucked me in.
Every time.
Well, speaking of things that sucked me in, I must admit I did get horribly, horribly addicted to Squid Game back when it was the big viral hit of the moment on Netflix. And I can't let this one go past without getting your take on it. Netflix are apparently working on a Squid Game game show. Now, without the death, but they're still going to do this. Is this a good idea? Is this just the weirdest thing ever? Because I'm going with weirdest thing ever.
Oh, of course it's going to be weird. Of course it's going to be crazy. In the same way that Floor is Lava, the game show, inferred that there's going to be people die, or you watch the creative edits when somebody falls in the pool to make it look like they've vanished. You don't see them climb out of the pool, they fell into the lava. Look, I think that Squid Game, the game, was almost an inevitability. Doesn't mean it's good.
But isn't that like, do they not spot that? And I think I'm using the word correctly here, the irony of a show that was pretty much saying how horrific capitalism is and all it, and yeah, it basically made the show that was the show was trying to prove the point that you shouldn't make a show like this. So they said, hey, let's make that show.
Sure. And I think at this point, I get to politely remind you that this is American TV executives who want more money.
Yes.
Yeah. Money talks in all sorts of really big and important ways. And one of the other things that's actually happened since you were last on the show in terms of money talking is that Telstra's money has been talking. Telstra's bought out Fetch TV, the last big PVR maker in the country. But they already had that Roku deal for the Telstra TV. Steve, what was the play here?
The play, honestly, is that for them to stay in the Roku space was just going to mean that they had to spend a whole bunch more money to really make it a competitive product. Because even the Rokus that they brought out over here and rebadged as Telstra TVs were ostensibly glorified, Amazon Pucks, right? They just
But that's
connected you to things.
Telstra's fault because they crippled the damn things.
I'm not saying that it's not. I'm agreeing with you.
If you bought a
That's
Roku
just
box
where
in
we are.
America, it's amazing. They bring it
Look,
out here, cripple it.
It's a really smart move for Telstra, who currently have a foot very deeply in the Foxtel camp still. And it's really, while Fetch isn't a huge international sense, it's not a huge platform across the country. For Telstra to invest in so that they now own 51% of Fetch is a huge proposition for Fetch. And it also means that for existing Fetch customers who have longed for your Binge or your KO or Foxtel Now apps to come and join the fray on their import or plug-in kind of platform, this makes it a dead cert that that's going to land there and make that happen for you. And it's a really good situation, because it means that for people where the thing that fell down for Telstra, you buy Telstra TV, you can't record anything. It's just going to connect you to catch-up services. Whereas a Telstra Fetch box can do that, or if you spend a bit more money, it's got a hard drive in it and you can record all of your free-to-air plus a whole bunch of other channels, and then you can still access your Stan, Netflix, and now then we would presume all of your Foxtel content, the push of a couple of buttons.
No, hang on. Your Foxtel content. So because let's go back a ways back. I remember writing about the Telstra TV box, which was Telstra's own PVR, similar to the Fetch TV. We're going back 10, 15 years, whatever.
Great for wedging doors open, terrible if you plugged it into a TV.
Yes, basically. And this was before the whole Roku box and all that. Now, that let you, through that, you could subscribe to Foxtel channels, because this is pre-Binge, KO, whatever. Now, I think the relationship between Telstra and Foxtel has changed since then in terms of whose parent owns a share of what. So, do you think that we'll still be is there still some kind of content arrangement between Telstra and Foxtel, and do you therefore think that Foxtel content could turn up on Fetch, because Fetch was like the alternative to Foxtel?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting mix that we find ourselves in, because absolutely Telstra they still have their money deep in Foxtel. They still are part owners of that mechanism and what that does. So to them, the opportunity to leverage that asset in multiple ways is only, I know they've been toying with the idea we're going to sell out of it, we're going to get out of it, whatever. Ultimately, they haven't. So that then means that what are Telstra going to do? Well, if they're going to buy something or buy into something like Fetch, where it has a ready-made platform to get more customers using, their investment in Foxtel, i.e. Binge and KO, Foxtel Now, then they would be crazy not to introduce those things onto that platform so that more people can either use it or, even better, sign up through them to use it.
Then what happens to the streaming services that are already on Fetch?
Yeah, that hasn't been discussed. The subscription packs that are available that give you some channels that are available on your Foxtel or your Binge accounts. I mean, it also throws into light the fact that look, Fetch have been deep in bed with Optus for quite some time. And
Well, I was
so
going to
there
say
are,
it's not just Optus though. Optus is the big example, but
yes,
they're also carried across a bunch of other competing providers. And I mean, I noticed this week, iiNet, one of TPG's subsidiary ISPs, literally this week published a guide to what Fetch TV was. This week. So
yep.
they've obviously still got future plans for Fetch. Wouldn't adding Foxtel to that help them, which is not something Telstra's into?
Look, it's when you've got that sort of money flying around in lots of different places, you're going to have to do the math and go, well, if we are robbing Peter to pay Paul, or if we're allowing them to sign up here to get this, this is part of the benefit. If they own the large proportion, the 51% share of Fetch, and iiNet are heavily investing in saying you can buy your Fetch through us and access the stuff and do the things there, well, then there's the capacity that they get at least the purchase price, if not the ongoing. And of course, if they've then got access to their other investment, which is the Foxtel streaming services, why would you not want to make that available, even if it was on a competitor's platform? Now, Optus have intentionally, let's say, backed away politely. They haven't officially made an announcement that they're stepping away from supporting Fetch. However, I have it on good authority that you can't buy from Optus a Fetch box anymore.
Now, see, that's a big deal because when Optus Sport first came out as a streaming service and it was streaming, I think, the World Cup,
Yes.
you could watch it directly through Optus or you could watch it through Fetch. And all
Yes.
the people who were complaining about how shit the coverage was because they were watching it through Optus and it was terrible. All the
Yes.
people saying, I don't know what you're talking about, we're
We're on
watching it
Fetch.
through Fetch because it was also using Fetch's back-end infrastructure and Fetch actually knew what they were doing when it comes to streaming services.
Yes.
So if Optus walks away from Fetch and then you can't get Optus Sport on a Fetch TV box, and Optus actually gave away a shed load of Fetch TV boxes to try and apologize for the fact that it was so hard to watch Optus Sport. So what happens with the next World Cup then if Optus wants you to watch Optus Sport, not the World Cup, whatever it is that Optus have got, the EPL, we'll say. If Optus wants you to watch the EPL on a Fetch TV box because it works better than on their own servers, but it's now owned by Telstra, and there's too many my enemy's enemy is my friend things going on here.
It really is.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought I was the one who was not meant to be able to pick sports from each other. You're confusing our roles on the show.
I just confused myself, I think, at one point.
To interject, sorry, Steve, Optus Sport, I believe, is available on a bunch more platforms now. So Optus does, I think, have more of a step-away position
but it had to be
used to back when that first World Cup that they had was a thing.
But if you wanted to watch Optus Sport on a Fetch device, you had to buy that Fetch device from Optus. If you'd bought it from another ISP, you couldn't get Optus Sport on it. It was actually different firmware on the box.
That's correct. And the challenge that we face now, until Optus officially and completely divorce themselves from Fetch, and look, they may be coaxed back, given that it is ultimately just a box drop and they have that